Now, for quite a while now, I have been on a very stupid quest to find cheap art supplies. I'm not even talking about good value art supplies, I'm just talking about cheap. Because I'm an idiot. Okay, so here's an example of my foolishness. Ages ago, I went to Daiso and I bought this calligraphy paper. And I thought to myself, it could be a good contender for some highly affordable watercolor paper. As I was imagining it being used for like Asian calligraphy, I suppose. And as my ignorant mind understood Asian calligraphy, I imagined giant wet ink brushes filled full of ink, just being slathered all over the paper. Yes, giant, thick characters. I know Daiso is a Japanese shop, but I didn't know much about Japanese culture. I still don't. And I saw this paper being sold right next to the ink and ink brushes, and I drew my own conclusions. On the back of the package it says, "Do not use this product for purposes other than its originally intended purpose." Which is exactly what I did. Now, I was shocked as to how thin this paper was. I was even more shocked when I discovered I was holding two of them together. It must be like 30 GSM or something. And then I tried drawing on it. This paper is like drawing on a thin piece of sponge. In fact, I reckon a sponge would be less absorbent. Because of this problem, I had to find a pen that didn't rely on the capillary action as much. Like using a fountain pen, just left giant wide blotches all over the paper. The lines were like 3 times the width of what they should have been. Fine liners were also quite bad. The only thing I found that would give a consistent line width was a rotating isograph. That is until I found a Tombow food brush pen that was running very dry, so that then worked rather well. And then I tried doing watercolor on it, and that was bad as well. The absorbency was still being a pain. Not as much as the ink, as like accurate lines are more important to me than a wee bit of colors outside the lines, but it was still unacceptable. Surprisingly though, this paper survived the light watercolors I put on it. Any paper of this thickness I think would have just dissolved. Although I still had to be careful not to poke too hard. So after I had finished with this piece of paper, my quest for cheapness had not yet finished, as I also later attempted to use baking paper as watercolor paper. I found that you can gently remove the waxy surface on one side of the paper using some ultrafine sandpaper. Yes, and then the remaining waxy stuff on the other side seems to keep the paper together. It doesn't look the best, but it actually works. This is the point where I realized I was being an idiot. I was spending lots of creative energy just trying to be as stingy as possible. I had lost sight of the pursuit of good value art supplies and just ended up concentrating as cost as the only factor, which is really bad. Because I have spent a portion of my life trying to learn how to draw. I have bought and used many sketchbooks. I've thrown away many practice sketches that were for the sole purpose of improvement, for a foundation of skill, for something greater. And now if I use cheap garbage as the final product, as in something I plan to keep, what value am I giving to the time I've spent on it? Not only the time I've spent on that single piece, but also the time I've spent honing my skills. Have I really spent a portion of my life developing skills so I can then bottleneck my skills into trash materials? Is your time, your life, so worthless that you should use materials that are less than you can afford? And then to also confirm my stupidity, I started thinking about how much money I'm really saving by trying to use unnecessarily cheap materials. Like how many finished artworks and comics do I really have time to create per week? Sometimes it's only one. So even if I buy some of the more expensive paper, I still might only be spending $5 a week on a hobby that's important to me. Now, due to the law of diminishing returns when it comes to buying expensive stuff. I probably won't be buying the most expensive paper all the time, but it does put my situation in the right perspective for me. I'm torturing myself with cheap supplies for no reason. The reason why I started using unusually cheap supplies was a mixture of trying to satisfy my frugal nature and also the thrill of finding something that actually worked. There's nothing wrong with either of those things, just I need to remember to keep it in check before it ruins my art. Okay, so that's one tale of stupidity for you, which is something I should have realised earlier. In fact, it was something I realised earlier, but I like to drag my habits around with me for longer than I should. But now the baggage has been dropped. The weight of my foolishness that my body has been accustomed to has now been lifted. Now I feel like I weigh nothing at all. My ascension from the stress of this material world now feels like an act of physics beyond my control. Maybe I really just had to stop gambling my money on cheap products. I wasn't saving any money purchasing the cheap stuff. Half the time was just the gambler's eternal hunt for the next big win, while the skills I should be developing are just decaying in the background. Or I could be drawing digitally as well. That's probably the most cheapest and most effective way to make a good quality product. I've mentioned that before. Okay, well, here's my graphics tablet. I can see it. Righto, it's over there. I'll grab it. Here's my stylus. Good old stylus. Oh, wow. An intense wave of boredom just came over me. Can't stay awake. I need paper. Paper, where's the paper? Paper. Paper. That's better. Sweet, beloved paper. Forgive me for my unfaithfulness. That's okay.